April 9th is just a little over a week away. Idaho. Idaho is just a simple drive for my wife and I, as we're going to be in the Ada County Courthouse watching Bryan Kohberger's motion and limine hearings before Judge Hippler. Gonna be interesting. Gonna be interesting. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm ARHayes. This is Convict's Thoughts, and we discuss true crime from a unique perspective, one of a prior criminal who's worked very hard to change his ways. But I have to admit, we're just over a week away from being in the courtroom in Ada County Courthouse, Boise, Idaho, where Bryan Kohberger will be in that defendant's chair before Judge Hippler as the motions and limine hearings take place. There's battles going on, ladies and gentlemen, between the prosecution and the defense. The battle is real as they prepare, fast-tracking their way to a very, very big trial later this year, end of August, beginning of September, if things go smoothly. But trust me, things can divert from that path to getting to trial very quickly. It only takes a few motions, it takes a few arguments, and a judge's decision, and with all of this could be put on pause. But I'll tell you what, the battles are not only happening between the defense teams of Ann Taylor, Nassau, and now Bitka Barlow. And remember, we also got to utilize the name Cy Ray as a part of the defense. Over 30 years worth of experience. And he brings that knowledge to the defense team for the very first time. And as many of you know, he just put out an affidavit. He just put that affidavit in front of Judge Hippler in the Ada County Courthouse, demanding answers, but also demanding attention on the very member of the prosecution that he feels as though needs to be looked into, Miss Ashley Jennings. That's right, because, ladies and gentlemen, that prosecution team, which did just add a new member here recently of power as well from the Boise Prosecutorial Office. You have Jeff Nye, well-spoken. You have Bill Thompson. Hasn't said much recently, but he's got years worth of experience. Whether that's good experience or bad, that all debates on who you talk to. But then you have good old Ashley Jennings. And I have a gut feeling, ladies and gentlemen, when this case approaches trial and even gets to trial, we will hear very, very little from Miss Jennings, because I think she's lost the power of the words and the voice that need to be heard. And I also believe that Bill Thompson and Jeff Nye have come to the realization she is the weak link of the prosecution team. I'm excited to be in the courtroom. I want to visually see it all. But I'm also very nervous because, as many of you know, based upon my background, I've been in these court situations before myself. And they're nerve-wracking when you're a defendant, but even I today I still feel the nerves when it comes to even watching. I don't know why that is. It could just potentially be the setting. It could be that courthouse, that very judge looking over at the bailiffs, seeing a prosecutorial team that is demanding that Bryan Kohberger take responsibility for what they say is his actions. But again, like I said, the arguments are not even just in the courtroom. This now, it has flowed over the boiling point across all social media platforms, where the arguments between those that truly believe that Bryan Kohberger is without a question, without a doubt, guilty, compared to those that stand on the side that they feel like he's absolutely innocent. But the people that literally take the biggest of beatings outside of those two groups are those that are looking for the true justice way, the right down the middle, innocent until proven guilty. I haven't made up my mind, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely open-minded to the point I know there is circumstantial evidence in this case. But I do expect that there needs to be an explanation and a tie together for that circumstantial evidence to literally be the guilty connection for Bryan Kohberger. This man is facing death. Let's kind of think about that for a minute. Compare this man, Bryan Kohberger, who has not admitted guilt to anything and has fought from minute one all the way through the process, is facing potential death for a quadruple homicide. Where someone like Chris Watts, who took the lives of not only his wife, but his two young, beautiful daughters, his children, even confessing to the very, very disturbing crime. He only got life in the penitentiary. Think about that for a minute. The way that our system is set, some people are so driven to find Kohberger prematurely guilty of these crimes based upon what they consider to be circumstantial evidence. We're going to discuss that in a minute. Compared to someone like Chris Watts, who is willing to actually admit to the crime. A very disturbing, disgusting crime at that. And yet, Chris Watts still enjoys his commissary, enjoys his letter writing, is enjoying his privileges. And ladies and gentlemen, I do want to let people know Chris Watts has not been moved from a Wisconsin maximum security penitentiary to a minimum security penitentiary. It has not happened. So just take a deep breath. He's still in hiding in Wisconsin at a maximum security penitentiary. And no, Chris Watts was not the one beat up. That was Scott Peterson in California. You have to be careful of the very facts that people release because they're not always true. And that's the problem with the Idaho 4 case against Bryan Kohberger. And that's why I believe I need to attend these upcoming hearings, the motions in Limine, not because I can make a difference or because I can change any of the results or even share my voice for the judge or the prosecution or anybody involved in this case to listen. But I just want to take it all in. I want to feel as though our justice system is truly working the way it's supposed to be, because if it's not, then I'm going to take to this platform and share my thoughts and share the reasons why I feel as though it's not with all to see. But circumstantial evidence, let's talk about circumstantial evidence real quickly, considering that's what it seems like everybody who has found Bryan Kohberger guilty of this crime is heavily relying upon right now. In most cases, it's not even circumstantial. It's not even real evidence that people are still grasping onto. But we're only going to talk about some circumstantial new items that have come out through the court documents, because finally through the court documents, and it's not the prosecution that's releasing. It's not the prosecution that's releasing the transparent details. Because remember, if you look at the 911 call and the text messaging situation between Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, it was not the prosecution who released the text messages in the amount that should have been released the transparent way. That had to come from the defense. The defense, in their response to the prosecution, relayed more of the honest information than the state did. But circumstantial evidence. We're still talking about a car that evidently was driving all over Moscow on the night of the crimes. And supposedly there's some video of that vehicle. Not really the greatest of video from what we understand, because it sure is still difficult for them to identify Bryan Kohberger's actual car, considering the FBI still seems to be set and most comfortable on a 2011 to 2013. But they're willing to arrest in an attempt to convict somebody that doesn't drive that make or model of a vehicle. Same make. I gotta take that back. It's a Hyundai. It's an Elantra, but it's the wrong years. At least they got the color right. But ladies and gentlemen, you have to ask yourself, in this circumstantial evidence of this vehicle, with all the times that they've stated that Bryan Kohberger just happened to be in that area, stalking the house, watching the house, surveilling the house, however the heck they want to say it, you really just got to look at it and wonder, where is the daytime footage of that very vehicle when they claim it came back the next day to the crime scene at 9-something a.m.? Wouldn't that be a better photo to utilize? One in the sun, one during the day? And you're telling me, with all those other trips that were made by Bryan Kohberger to that very area, all those stalking, surveilling of the home moments, they don't have anything better than what they caught on the night of the crime? Light shining on trees, lights reflecting in windows. That's all circumstantial evidence, ladies and gentlemen. There is no proof that's Bryan Kohberger in that car. None. The only way you tie Bryan Kohberger to that car is if you truly believe Bryan Kohberger was the reason why the knife sheath was left in the 1122 King Road home. I get it. DNA is hard to overcome, ladies and gentlemen, but we've had this discussion so many times on the type of DNA, and it's also on a movable object. It's very much so on a movable object. One that the defense is heart and soul fighting, using the very words placed. Now they're even pushing the issue to planted. That's an interesting defense. I know many people say fairy tale, fantasy world, but let me tell you, coming from the actual criminal side of things and work through the courtroom, it's not that often that you have that fantasy tale of planting of evidence. Most lawyers don't go that route. Most defense lawyers will not put their career in jeopardy by going down that framed, placed, planted road. It's a difficult one to prove. It's a very difficult one to prove. And it's going to be interesting to see how Ann Taylor is going to move forward with that, because legitimately, coming from a man of reason, a little bit of common sense, it's extremely difficult to prove. Just like it's extremely difficult to get Judge Hippler to understand that this type of DNA is not as creditable as what he makes it out to be in his very hearings, pretty much damning Bryan Kohberger based upon him leaving his DNA at the crime scene. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're working our way. And this is why I feel like it's important for me in that courtroom to be able to hear it myself. We're working our way through a case where the judge has already clearly stated he believes Bryan Kohberger was at the crime scene and left the DNA there. Doesn't want to think about the other DNA left at the crime scene. He only wants to think of Bryan Kohberger. That's it. It's pretty interesting, I must say. It's pretty interesting. Circumstantial evidence. Let's say Bryan Kohberger did buy a K-bar knife with a knife sheath and a sharpener in March of 2022 while in Pennsylvania, having it delivered directly to his parents' home. I know it's circumstantial. Now all of a sudden, there's a potential purchase of the weapon that at the very beginning of this case, law enforcement stated was most likely a weapon of interest. They never stated that it was that type of weapon that aligned with the injuries, because we don't even know the injuries that were on each of the bodies. 4 people casually just thought to be taken by a K-bar knife. No explanation, no actual autopsy reports, nothing before us to prove that. We're just supposed to believe it. But because this young man purchased that type of knife, which is still not even confirmed for all of us, it's just within the documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, these are the very writers of a PCA that are now leading the prosecution into making these statements within their motions. How's that PCA looking now? But 2,500 miles away, a knife was purchased, delivered to a family home. How do you know it made it from Pennsylvania to Idaho? What proof do we have? Prove it. And don't tell me, well, you found the knife sheath at the crime scene, because guess what, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this. I've never heard of a knife sheath taking someone's life. Ever. Never heard of a knife sheath being utilized as an actual murder weapon. And we don't know where the knife is, or even if the knife made it from Pennsylvania. Now, the newest one is because Dylan Mortensen decided to do like a little second grade example drawing, sketch, whatever, of a over the head mask. It's possible. The prosecution says they have a Dick's receipt of a purchase of the Bokavan in Pennsylvania in January of 2022. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Did that make it to Idaho? Can he prove it? See, these are the types of things, ladies and gentlemen, just like the crime scene document that Bryan Kohberger wrote for his educational grading. It was a mandated assignment. He wrote it. He did it masterfully and exceptionally well. But guess what? That was what he wanted his career to entail. So he should be good at it. He should be exceptional at it, considering he was pursuing a PhD level education in it, and he wanted to further his career. But that's right. That must be evidence against him as well that he was capable of committing a quadruple homicide. Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, I get it. He did drive a white Hyundai Elantra. It just happened to be the wrong years from what FBI felt comfortable putting out as the years, but that's circumstantial as well. He did drive the same color and a Hyundai Elantra, but like I said, just the wrong years. I guess that's more actual proof of evidence against Bryan Kohberger, even though they found the very make and model and years and color of a Hyundai Elantra, wrecked a state over, but never had interest in that vehicle whatsoever in the investigation. We're not even going to get into all the hoopla of the cell phone, AT&T timing records. I think ARHayes got that pretty much handled. If the judge even allows him to testify in the upcoming motion hearings, we're going to find out, because Judge Hippler could literally put his foot down, not even allow him to testify at trial. What a tragedy that would be, considering the man has dedicated his entire life to solving crime. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You're talking about another person, just like Bryan Kohberger was, that dedicated his life, his knowledge, his education, his entire foundation to solving crime. Even helped solve thousands of other crimes, working in a very difficult state when it comes to crime in Arizona. But people now, because he stands on the side of Bryan Kohberger, arguing the fact that the state is not presenting evidence properly, they want to discredit him and remove him from all of this, as if now all of a sudden he's a nothing. Seen no proof to tie all this circumstantial evidence together that everybody claims is there. Remember, everybody screaming that Bryan Kohberger was found with one of the victim's IDs. If that was the case, it would be a federal case. He would have federal charges. That is federal when you have somebody else's identification. He didn't get caught with one of the victim's IDs. Stop it. Bryan Kohberger was never charged of breaking into a young lady's home that he was friends with and actually put together her security system for. He was never charged with anything having to do with that. That means nothing. So stop it. Bryan Kohberger did not stalk Kaylee and Bethany at some grocery store, in which one of the victims' families loved to tell the story of that stalking incident, but it comes back to two African-American young men, not Bryan Kohberger. But they still want to say it's circumstantial against Bryan Kohberger for some reason. At the end of the day, no connection has been made to Bryan Kohberger and any of the victims. And I'm tired of watching social media platforms that think they can connect the dots, that literally come out with this boom, bang, bing, bong, whatever the heck these reporter wannabes are, because there's no proof. There's none. I can go into a story right now and tell you a fairy tale that would equal the same amount of circumstantial evidence that they have against Bryan Kohberger, and it would not prove guilt in this case. But I do have to surmise my video in one sad way. Our society has got to the point that we are so judgmental. We are so judgmental that the defense team for Bryan Kohberger feels as though they need to stand before the jury and explain to why he looks a little different than others, why he may rub his hands or wash his hands differently than others. You see, we're all unique as human beings. We're all different. But the problem is the judgment has gotten so bad in today's society that I don't know if Bryan Kohberger has a shot at trial. Think about what 12 people in that jury box are going to see when they look at Bryan Kohberger, and what they're going to hear, and what the little details that are going to be fed to them by the prosecution that just might not be fully the truth. But they're undefendable by the defense because it's hard to overcome a theory-based prosecution on circumstantial evidence, because you, in your own self, have to put together a theory-based defense, the alternative perpetrator, and other things that a judge just might not allow. But those 12 people within that jury box are still going to be staring at a man who could potentially act a little bit differently just because that's who he is as a person. Not because that's who he is as a quadruple homicide maniac. That's just who he is as a person. And if you want an example of how devastating that could potentially be for Bryan Kohberger and his defense team, just watch a few YouTube content creators. Just venture over to a few Facebook groups that all can look at a picture of a PhD level student who was trying to work for law enforcement. And they've all pointed at him and called him the devil and the demon. The judgment never stops, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm telling you, I will be in the courtroom in Boise, Idaho, Ada County Courthouse on April 9th and 10th. And I'm going to be able to visually see and hear everything myself. And I'll bring you what I see and what I hear and what I feel based upon that. And I don't judge. I'm ARHayes. It's a Convict's Thoughts. I appreciate you spending some time with me. You have a great night.